What up, TCK Potters? Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Sky Guasco. Welcome back to another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, aka TCK Pod. This is episode 390. We are closing in quickly on 400 episodes. Very, very excited about that. We got something special for you, so tune in a couple weeks when we get the 400th episode, but we are not quite there yet. Today I have a special guest, first time on the show. I've been a fan of his work for a long time. He is an extended part of the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast family, who you guys know very well. Chris, Eric, and Alex have been on this show, and Josh. We'll give Josh a shout out as well. The four of those guys have been on the TCK Pod for the last couple of years. Chris is a weekly stand-in during the season to break down the TCK Listener League. I'm also in their Listener League as well for the Dynasty side of things. We're a big family at this point. And now we have an extended member of that. We have RJ from the Dynasty Commish side of things. So if you listen to the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast that we rep when Chris and Eric came on last episode, they also have a Dynasty brand of that as well, which is strictly Dynasty content. RJ, Brian, and Josh do a hell of a job on that side. So when you download the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you also get the Dynasty side of it as well. These guys are doing really great things, and I'm very excited to bring in RJ to do the rookie rundown for the AFC South. It is our final division in the rookie rundown categories. Bobby and I had done a bunch. The Commish boys did the rest. Now we have RJ to break down the AFC South. We're also going to have a Dynasty discussion. You guys know that I'm a little more old school. Bobby and I lean more toward the redraft side of things, and Lucas and Dwayne lead more to the Dynasty side of things. So we get a little bit of 50-50 here on the podcast, but it is Dynasty season. It is May. We are in Dynasty season. We are in rookie drafts right now, and no better guest to bring on right now than my man RJ. We'll bring him in. And RJ, it is really great to have you on finally, man. Again, I've been a big fan of your work for quite a while. We love the Commish boys in general. You're a new family member to them for this last season or so. And I love what you and Josh and Brian are able to do on the Dynasty side of things. Really quickly, just kind of introduce yourself to the TCK Potters. Again, very familiar with the Commish boys in general, but what you guys are doing on the Dynasty side of things and why maybe you lean more Dynasty than redraft. Have you always been Dynasty? Do you also play redraft? Tell me a little bit about yourself, where everybody can find you, and what you're doing, man. I'm happy to have you on.
Sounds great. Glad to be here. Thanks so much, Sky, for extending the invitation. It's great to be part of the Commish boys in that family and kind of doing the Dynasty thing over there. Those are some great guys I got plugged into last year. Actually helped them with their draft strategy in the kickoff of their Listener Dynasty League that they did with you. So I was kind of behind the scenes with them then. We had started our podcast last year, and we decided to kind of merge with them and bring our content to the Commish podcast. So, in terms of Dynasty, I felt like it was a natural progression, and I'm actually surprised you hadn't taken the leap given your longevity in redraft. But I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was really good at redraft, and I got to the point where I was like, dude, I'm really good at this. And I hate giving up my team every year because I'm so good that I want to keep my team. And so Brian and I actually, we go way back. We were doing a seasonal every year, redraft. And then we were like, okay, let's extend it to keepers. Let's extend it to a 10-team keeper league. And then finally I was like, dude, let's just go full GM and we'll keep everybody. And Brian was like, I don't know if we do that, let's do it this way. And so we decided to go all in on full Dynasty. We actually even did 2 quarterback Dynasty, which was nobody was doing 2 QB leagues. This was, I'm talking, this goes back to 2012. So 9 years ago, we did a 2 QB league, and that was it. We ran that league for about 7 years. And then we wanted to expand it to a 12-team league. So we blew it up and expanded it. And yeah, we've really enjoyed the Dynasty landscape. It's fun finding new strategies for trades and different things like that, and kind of being on the NFL grind all year around. It keeps the NFL alive.
Dude, I love that, and that's funny. I have a similar trajectory. I've been playing redraft since 2008 or 9 or so, and my home league started. It's just like a bunch of poker buddies, a bunch of dudes I played baseball with and shit growing up, and basically we did the same thing where it was like you have a couple great players. And you're just kind of like, damn, dude, I don't want to throw them back in the pond, And Dynasty wasn't Dynasty yet, as you mentioned. Like, it wasn't quite a thing yet. So we would do it every year. And then we were like, let's do a keeper. Let's you get to keep one player. And then we're like, shit, let's keep 2 players. And now you hear 3. And if you listen to the fantasy footballers, they have a cool thing where they actually do 3 keepers, but one of them is kind of this auction and it's a raffle. So you only get 2 of the 3 back. And so it adds a little more excitement. So we started doing the same thing. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I started playing Dynasty and didn't know what to do. I was out of my league, bro. I feel like I'm pretty good at redraft too. But Dynasty's different. You draft differently. It's a full year situation. We're talking right now in May about serious conversations in Dynasty because people are drafting right now for rookie content. What we tell people today on this podcast, people are going to do tonight in their leagues, and it's going to stick for the season and years to come. Redraft is more kind of predictive, let's see how the rookies turn out. Let's see what preseason looks like. Let's find out where Aaron Rodgers lands. Does Deshaun actually play or not? Let's wait on all that shit. We're not getting into it until July for real in redraft. Dynasty, we're already a month behind, frankly. So I'm really excited to get into this, man. It's been a lot of fun listening to you guys on the Commish Dynasty side. Again, you, Brian, and Josh do a great job, and of course, we're longtime family with Chris, Eric, and Alex as well.
So, on the Sky, I want to add something there, because you do have a listener base that might be newer to Dynasty. You touched on a point that it actually came up when we rebooted our home league and expanded it out to 12 teams. We did that in just following the NFL draft. I think it was maybe June. And this was in 2019. If you're not familiar, you could go back in the archives, but in 2019, I think Darius Geis was a rookie. He tore his ACL in camp. Andrew Luck retired. There was a bunch of Allen Robinson might've tore his ACL in 2019. There was it was attrition, just a war of attrition on some high-end assets in Dynasty. And some guys were really pissed that we started our Dynasty up in June before all of this went down in camp. So if you're new to Dynasty and you want to take the plunge, but you're coming from that redraft realm, do your first Dynasty startup just like a redraft. Wait until camp is over. Wait till things are settled. And that way you get the full effect kind of in a redraft manner, and then kind of it tails off into the off season, and you get to feel that out with as much information as possible, and you can learn on the job, so to speak.
I think that's an excellent point, man. And one thing that's really frustrating to me last year, Chris and I kind of headed it, but the Commish boys and TCK were involved in what we called the Gene Dynasty League. And it was basically up and coming accounts from Instagram, people with followers of 250 to 1,000, kind of up and coming, but taking it seriously. And we were part with 10 other groups, and everybody was taking it seriously. We all have podcasts and channels, and we decided to do the draft in April. It was a slow draft. It took us 3 weeks to do it, whatever. And the Commish boys and then the draft happened, or I'm sorry, this is pre-draft. So it happened in March. Then the draft happened, and the Commish guys got slaughtered in rookies coming in. I think they picked I don't know. I think it was they picked Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift came in. They picked Todd Gurley and Cam Akers came in. There was 3 or 4 of those situations for them, and they were furious. And I get it, because if you're starting a league, I agree with you. You should draft once you know everything in August. I agree with you. But once you're in that Dynasty League, then it becomes year round. And when the Super Bowl ends and it's March, April, May, you start, redrafting. You have your rookie draft after the NFL draft, and you kick it back up. But I think that's a great call, RJ. And I'm glad that you think that way, because I get kind of frustrated when people invite me into Dynasty leagues, and I'm like, sure, man, it's May. And thanks. I'd love to be in your league. Thanks for inviting me. When do we draft? hoping they're like, late July. And it's always like, bro, like tomorrow. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, I don't want to say no because I want to play. And the invites are always, it's flattering. But I'm also like, dude, I know you're stoked, but I don't want to do that anymore. I'm tired of drafting guys I think are good today. Like if I draft Davante Adams today, I'm really happy about it. I could be really upset about that in 3 weeks, and it could throw off my whole rest of my team. And I have enough stress with this shit anyway. I don't want to get into more of that, So I am glad that you feel that way with startup drafts. Now, last question, and we'll dive into things here. Rookie drafts. I know the blood gets flowing as soon as draft weekend ends. Sunday happens, Monday morning, Twitter blows up and everybody's drafted rookies and it's game on. Are you that guy, or are you still kind of like, let's wait to see some of these guys out at camp? Like, does Mac Jones actually have an opportunity to even be a part of this team this year? Is Travis Etienne actually a wide receiver? Like, do you want to know those kind of things? So we're talking closer to late May, June, or are you chomping at the bit? Well, it's like, fuck, man, the guys have landed. It's go time. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, I'm all in on drafting immediately. So I really scaled up on Dynasty last year into multiple leagues, and this is my first year doing a ton of rookies Dynasty drafts right after the draft. I don't necessarily advise that because even though it's a slow draft, it is insane trying to navigate multiple leagues and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm chomping at the bit. Last year, the moment Jonathan Taylor was drafted, we started our home league rookie draft. I had 101 that I had traded Corey Davis for and was pretty pumped about. And that was it. Boom, Jonathan Taylor on the board. Everybody else can go if they want to, or they can wait. That's the nature of like a slow rookie draft. But yeah, I'm all in well before camp and things like that. And that's part of the nature of just the job, right? Like we are constantly looking into rookies and diving into film and setting things up so that once the landing spots are in, we kind of know where we want to go for the most part. We've talked about it ad nauseum, and so we're ready to go. Whereas again, the casual listener, if you're in a more casual league, if you can hold out and wait until things continue to develop over the course of the off season, then you're going to be better suited. You're going to feel more excited about the taking on Dynasty, whereas again, like you said, the reaction could be it'll leave a sour taste in your mouth. We want people to stay in Dynasty. We want them to enjoy it. We don't want you to draft right after draft night to draft Darius Geis, and 3 months later he tears his ACL. Like that just ruins it for you, and you may never come back. And so take it slow as you're getting in, and as you become more adjusted and more of a veteran, if you will, then you can go nuts.
I love it, man. I love that. And I'm glad you said all that because that's how I feel about it with Dynasty. But I'll be honest. I mean, we got 4 guys on our squad, and I would say that Bobby, LaMarco, and I are the redraft guys. Lucas and Dwayne are the Dynasty guys. Now, all of us play everything, auctions and Dynasty and redraft and best ball. We do it all. But I lean more toward redraft as opposed to Dynasty. And it's it's good to hear a Dynasty cat like yourself give that advice that I've been feeling for a while anyway. So
for sure,
I appreciate it, man. Quite the intro, but it's been a long time coming for you to come on. And I'm excited to get into this. What we're going to do is we're going to get into our rookie rundown of the AFC South. If you're watching on YouTube, listeners, you're clearly a Colts fan. Luck, Hilton, and Manning there behind you. So we're going to kick it off with the AFC South. I am sitting here with RJ of the Commish Dynasty Football Podcast. Make sure to download that and give RJ a follow on Twitter. And if you are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, feel free to jump in the comments if you have any Dynasty questions for RJ right now. We'll bring those up in real time as we get them. Without any further ado, man, let's get into it. I'm going to basically just coast us through these 4 teams here and just get your replies quickly. We'll take a quick break for our sponsors, and then when we come back in the second half, we're going to dive through the top 20 Dynasty picks as of right now in May, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper on some of those sleepers here. So we'll start here with the Houston Texans. Again, we don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson, so we're not going to mention much of that. I don't want to get into too much of Deshaun Watson at this point, but They do draft Davis Mills. I'm a West Coast guy. I live down the street from Autzen Stadium. I'm an Oregon Duck. I watch a lot of Stanford football. Davis Mills is not going to light the league on fire, but I think he's a quality quarterback that was underrated personally. Only played 12 games. I get it. But Trey Lance went number 3. He played 17 in the FCS. So I like Davis Mills. They pick him 3rd in the 3rd round. Nico Collins out of Michigan. Hit or miss there with the draft grade just because Michigan's Michigan, and this kid's an animal, but he went to Michigan. He was used improperly. And Brevin Jordan, who goes in the 5th round, but I think arguably the most athletic tight end outside of Kyle Pitts in this draft. So how do you feel about these Texan landing spots here, Mills, Collins, and Brevin Jordan?
Yeah, so as we started to go live, the Texans signed Jeff Driscoll, which it just continues to be more and more intriguing, right? They're bringing more and more quarterbacks into the quarterback room with the situation looming on Watson. So, I think Davis Mills was a young insurance piece. Maybe they get lucky. A lot of times these types of guys don't really have staying power in the NFL unless they just absolutely light the world on fire, like Dak Prescott or Tom Brady type. But he's intriguing. I mean, all of us probably think Watson gets suspended. So does Davis Mills get a look because we all know what Tyrod Taylor is? I'm not sure. Davis Mills was actually one of my favorite flyers that I was going to take in the 3rd and 4th rounds of rookie dynasty drafts in terms of super flex. I always speak in terms of super flex, by the way. But actually listening to your pod with Ryan Leaf, you guys, I believe, talked up Kellen Mond quite a bit. So now I have 0 shares of Davis Mills, and I have quite a few shares of Kellen Mond. I actually really like the take a lot after doing some more deep dives into Kellen Mond. Unfortunately, he's not on today's show, but I will say I like the Kellen Mond talk you guys had.
Yeah, that's great. And shouts out to our, I could say my friend at this point, Ryan Leaf. I co-produce a show with him, the Ryan D. Leaf Show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can check us out on YouTube, the Ryan D. Leaf Show with the one and only Ryan Leaf, former number 2 overall pick, Heisman finalist, yada, yada. Again, I mean, he for the last couple of years, he's worked for the Pac-12 network and lives in the Pac-12, and he loves Davis Mills. Mm-hmm. And I do too, but I love Kellen Mond. And again, just being overshadowed in the ACC by everybody else there. Kellen Mond's the truth, man. And I don't think he's going to do anything for 3 years unless Kirk Cousins gets hurt, but I love him in Minnesota. I don't want to digress too much, but I do love Kellen Mond. So he's definitely a super flex dynasty hold for sure. Davis Mills, I think, will play sooner than later. Either Tyrod Taylor doesn't pan out or he could get injured. The last 2 teams that Tyrod Taylor's been on, the rookie behind him has come up and broken all the Peyton Manning rookie records, right? Baker Mayfield a couple years ago with the Browns, my boy Justin Herbert last year with the Chargers. We'll see what happens with Davis Mills this year.
You'll know what you have in Davis Mills really quickly. Nico Collins, we talked about Nico Collins and Brevin Jordan as well. So Nico is Brian's favorite flyer. So Brian is he runs the show handle on Twitter at Dynasty_Addicts and is my co-host over on the Commish Dynasty podcast. So Brian is really, really eating up Nico Collins. I mean, he's got the 3rd round day 2 draft pedigree. He's in a situation that's kind of unsettled beyond Brandon Cooks. If Deshaun Watson is there, you got to like those odds of playing with a superstar quarterback. He's an average prospect at best, but he's got good size. And you never know, these top end quarterbacks will elevate talent. So, as Watson's situation becomes more clear, I think Nico Collins may even start to sneak up boards. And then Brevin Jordan, everybody's darling. He was everybody's tight end too, for the most part, heading into the pro days. And he really flopped at his pro day. And so I tried to do some more digging on why he fell in the NFL draft. For those of you that don't know, he went in the 5th round, had a great tight end career at Miami. He looked the part, in my opinion. I thought maybe there was off-field issues that could have driven that price down, and we may not know. They know so much more than we do at the NFL level when they're drafting these guys. That said, this is the type of guy that if the off-field issues, if that is something that exists and he overcomes them, he can emerge, right? if that's something that wasn't in existence and it truly was just because he had a bad pro day, DK Metcalf had a bad, it's famous for having a bad shuttle. People can overcome. Brevin Jordan's the type of athlete that I would want to bet on that. I'm not going to reach on him, but I would be willing to scoop some value on Brevin Jordan in that offense.
Absolutely. I think that's a great call. And again, I think he's just uber athletic, and I bet on the talent more often than not, especially when you're late in your drafts there. I'm going to leave your Colts for the end here. Why don't we skip on to the Jags? Of course, the talk of the draft, we knew this was coming about 4 months ago. We know this was coming for about 2 years. Trevor Lawrence goes first overall to the Jaguars, and then they go Travis Etienne in the back of the first round. This was surprising because they actually moved up. They probably could have gotten him where they were in the first pick of the second round, but they move up after Najee Harris goes. They moved up to get him. Urban Meyer, of course, has since come out in the last couple of weeks claiming that he's going to be playing some wide receiver. He could be looking for that Percy Harvin player that I've been talking about for quite a while. Percy Harvin with Urban Meyer back in the Florida days was phenomenal. And outside of migraines, unfortunately, he was one of the better athletes we've seen in the last 2 decades in Minnesota and Seattle, and unfortunately just couldn't last in the NFL with his migraines. But Luke Farrell and Jalen Camp way down the list here. We can skip on those guys. But Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, both these guys are going to be dynasty darlings for a long time. How do you feel about them both? And we have a couple questions coming in here in the quarterbacks, which I'll get to in a little bit. But how do you feel about Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne?
When you told me we were doing the AFC South, I was like, man, they really didn't get any talent. I think I've been very much burying in the back of my head that the Jacksonville Jaguars actually went out and drafted 2 offensive studs. So obviously Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he's been talked about for years and years. And now he's here. He's arrived. The Jets foiled their plans and their shot at him and gave him to Jacksonville. And honestly, it's probably for the best because Jacksonville tends to screw this up. You can't screw it up with Trevor Lawrence. He is an amazing prospect. I had put in my notes that Davis Mills out of Stanford is no Andrew Luck, whereas Trevor Lawrence has been often comped to Andrew Luck. He has more of a similar type of college production, not these gaudy, flashy numbers, but just he's very good with the ball in his hands. He makes good decisions. But he also happens to have won a title and a Heisman Trophy, unlike Luck. So you cannot go wrong with Trevor Lawrence. It's unfortunate that he's in the AFC South against my Colts because I do think Trevor Lawrence is going to be really, really good. And I do think that Urban Meyer, either there was some influence from Trevor Lawrence because he was always going to be that pick. And so there was a lot more conversation, right? What do you want? And maybe Trevor said, look, this is a guy in Travis Etienne that had 60 targets and 38 targets in back-to-back seasons. Like Trevor Lawrence pressed on his running back in the backfield. And that's not something that, the UDFA James Robinson really profiled as. So to bring in a true pass catching back of the prowess of Travis Etienne in college, where they don't really catch passes at the running back position, is something that I think was a specific fit for Trevor Lawrence, and Urban Meyer is going to adopt that into his playbook. I think there's a lot of misdirection. I don't know if Urban Meyer is just weird. I know everybody kind of hates on Urban Meyer with what they're going to do with him, but I will say there's no doubt in my mind that Travis Etienne has packages where he lines up in the slot. There's no doubt in my mind that James Robinson will, without a doubt, get touches and run between the tackles and things like that. And we're going to see creative usage of Travis Etienne, but he's a first-round running back who's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. And people are really shying away from that. And I think that they're going to be mistaken. I think he's very underrated in this offense.
Yeah, and former teammates, of course, at Clemson as well. So that'll be interesting. Jags making moves here with 2 Clemson Tigers right off the bat there.
For sure.
Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne. Let's go to the Titans. They did a lot of work on defense, which I think was a great move. Obviously, they lose Corey Davis. They lose Jonnu Smith. But most of the rest of that offense is firing on all cylinders, and those guys, frankly, weren't huge cogs in that offense, so they should be just fine there. Des Fitzpatrick in the 4th round and then Racey McCath in the 6th. But anything mentioned with Des Fitzpatrick, or we can just straight up put a pin in it and mention it later if you'll, maybe as one of our sleepers. We'll talk later on. If not, anything to get excited about with the Titans draft.
Yeah, there's not much there. I mean, if you guys do listen to a lot of the podcasts, especially if Josh and I get on together in the Commish Dynasty, we nerd out on analytics and stats and things that go far beyond, receptions and so on. And one of those things is day 3 pedigree, especially at the wide receiver position. It's rare to have an Antonio Brown. It's rare to have a Steph Diggs. And so a lot of times I'm fading all of those guys. A lot of people look at the situation in Tennessee and they say Corey Davis is gone. Josh Reynolds is meh. So we have an open competition at the second wide receiver, second in the pecking order in that offense. So maybe Dez can ascend. That's about all it is. In terms of that specific scenario, I'm not going to really chase after a 6th round wide receiver. So if you're going to add him, it's a speculative add in a dynasty league. And really there's not much else to talk about in Tennessee.
Man, I've been I don't know about a truther, but I've been a fan of Josh Reynolds from the beginning. It was kind of tongue in cheek on this podcast years ago when we were looking for deep sleepers. And I put him on my list originally when I started the show from the Rams, and he's just never had the chance. But when he's gotten the chance in Los Angeles, he's done well. So if he can get Corey Davis's workload, I do think that Josh Reynolds will be just fine. And then we'll go to your Colts, man. Not fantasy relevant, but Kwity Paye's a nice pick up there in the 1st round. Kylan Granson and Sam Ehlinger and Mike Strachan in the 7th round. So let's talk about, an extra tight end. Right now they don't have a tight end other than Jack Doyle, unless I'm mistaken. They might have Zach Ertz in a couple weeks, but that hasn't happened yet. And then Sam Ehlinger, it's Carson Wentz for now, but Carson Wentz has gotten banged up the last 3 or 4 seasons. Would you trust Sam Ehlinger, who was okay, but Texas isn't Texas anymore, and they picked him up in the 6th round?
Yeah, so Sam is so interesting. I thought that was a really interesting pick for us. Something that must have shown up on tape for Grigson to just kind of take a flyer on him, and I think that that's all he is. But guys like that can pan out in the right situations if a Carson Wentz goes down or something like that. Not rushing to hold him or anything like that, but I think it's very interesting. Also, a shout out to Sam. He lost his brother a few days after getting drafted. That was super sad to read that. So definitely thoughts were with him the last couple of weeks. In terms of the tight end position, we do have Gigantor, Mo Alley-Cox. He did sign his tender. We put a tender on him, which is very interesting. I believe it was a 2nd round tender, which is pretty high. But I do think overall we have an unsettled tight end depth chart. So Kylan Granson is somebody that's free in a lot of tight end premium leagues after the rookie draft. I have a couple of shares simply because of that. He's nothing special. If you follow the combine and some of those metrics, tight ends that run under a 4.7, those are the tight ends that tend to stick and actually produce in the NFL. And he ran a 4.64. So even at a pro day, they typically round up 0.05 points. So he runs under that 4.7 threshold. Could be meaningless for a 4th round pick, but somebody that a good speculative add in an unsettled situation. I mean, let's face it, tight ends rarely break out their first year. It's a big adjustment, but I have a couple shares.
Percentage chance Zach Ertz ends up in Indianapolis. What do you think?
Gosh, I have acquired several shares of Zach Ertz in hopes that he comes to Indy. I would say that if he really truly is on the market, there can't be more than 3 teams that are in the conversation, and so that would put his percentages at 33%. So that would be my shot if he's truly available for trade. 33% chance he's we are the one of the 3 teams that could be in that conversation. Obviously that's a ridiculously high percentage, but man, I want it to happen.
I got to be honest, bro. I would kick it up to 40 plus, because if you're knocking it down to 3 teams, I appreciate your thought process and the math. You actually came up with a real number if there's 3 teams, but I would say you're the front runner of those 3 teams.
True.
With Frank Reich and Carson Wentz. I mean, they have the camaraderie, they have the consistency. We talk about continuity on this podcast relentlessly. It matters so much in the NFL, especially if a quarterback is involved. They have that relationship from all their days back in Philadelphia. It would make sense for Zach Ertz to come over, and there's room for him. Right. Yep. I mean, he could be a piece of the pie, or he could be the immediate starter if he's able to be that guy, and him and Carson Wentz have that prowess in the red zone at least. So I would put your chances much higher, honestly, maybe even 50%, and knock the other 2 to around 25. Not to get you too excited. I don't call any shots, but
I would be very excited. I do want to give a shout to Josh on this. He did a deep dive on tight ends changing teams in the offseason and their performance the following season. A lot of times it's not great. Typically you want to see a tight end sign and stay with the team. In Zach Ertz's case, if he did go to Indianapolis, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with that, because it is a system he's familiar with. It's a system that he is played in, not like part of the coaching tree. He's played for that coach. And so with that quarterback as well, I feel really secure in that. And he's only 30 years old. People think he's like 50, you know?
Crazy.
Yeah.
NFL age is so ridiculous, because I don't know, somebody like Julio Jones, who's a 31-year-old man, like he's just done. He's completely archaic in the world of NFL. A normal 31-year-old man is like 5 years away from starting his life. Yeah,
seriously.
I just think it's so funny. All right, man. Well, I appreciate the rookie rundown for the AFC South. We're going to shut that down. I'm going to kick you off just for a second. You need a water break, go ahead. I'll break you off for just about 1 minute, and I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of sponsors. We'll come back and dive a little bit deeper on the dynasty side of things. Once again, shouts out to my man, RJ from the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast Dynasty side, and big up to the Commish crew. I want to give a shout out really quick here to 2 of our sponsors. We'll start with the Jersey Jungle. Y'all know how we do this. DM the Jersey Jungle on Instagram at the Jersey Jungle. You saw RJ's 3 Colts jerseys behind him. I've got Justin Herbert this week. I've got Mark Brunell this week, another former AFC South player, of course, with the expansion Jacksonville Jaguars back in 1995. I rotate my jerseys every single week, so you've seen them up behind me. I had Larry Fitzgerald, and I had Julio Jones last week. Both of those came from Jersey Jungle as well. These are stitch and twill jerseys. They are super clean. These are not the paste-on jerseys that run off in the dryer, all right? These are high-quality jerseys. They start at $65 at cost, but you use our promo code TCK, 10% off of 1 or 2 jerseys, 3% off of 3 jerseys. So basically you can get 3 jerseys for the cost of 1 on NFL.com at about $120. They're the same jersey, super clean. My man Trenton over at Jersey Jungle will help you out. Hit up the Jersey Jungle on Instagram. That's where they like to do their business. DM them at the Jersey Jungle. Tell them TCK sent you. Use the promo code TCK to receive 10 to 15% off of 10 to 15% off of 1 to 3 jerseys. And then, of course, we want to give a shout out to the newest hot sauce in the business, Bomb Banana Hot Sauce, banana-based hot sauce, not flavored hot sauce. Go to seekthespice.com, use the promo code TCK for 10% off of your order. Shouts out to our boys over in Michigan. These guys started in a dorm room, 4 best friends, started a hot sauce company. It has blown up. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, they had a featured article in Forbes magazine. Yes, Forbes magazine gave them a shout out here. Bomb Banana Hot Sauce, banana-based hot sauce. You can put it on all of your draft day favors, your game day favors, whatever it is. This is the newest thing in the hot sauce world. Delicious. I'm excited for them to expand on other fruits. So it's not, it still gives you that kick, but it has a nice kind of a creaminess with the bananas. It is not banana flavored. It's banana based. Go to seekthespice.com, use TCK to get 10% off of your order. Once again, shout out to Bomb Banana Hot Sauce. And I got to give really quick, you guys know I always share them here. Boom, we got the one a little bit more bland, and we got the red here with the muy muy, a little bit more heat for those of you that like that spice. We'll bring RJ back on here quick. And RJ, I have to ask, because I ask everybody else, are you a spice guy with hot sauce, or are you least spice, more flavor, maybe more heat? Chris threw it out there that he likes more flavor, less heat, but the missus is all about the heat, so he doesn't really have a choice sometimes. I'm not too much in the heat. How about you? Do you like heat in your hot sauce?
So, man, I used to like heat, but as you get older, I feel like you feel it a lot more when it's coming out. And that is
fair enough.
I had to tone it way down on some heat. Okay. I used to work at a wing restaurant a long time ago. We would experiment and make some fun hot sauces, and things went south real quick.
Literally and figuratively. Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, I hear you, man. So shouts out Bomb Banana Hot Sauce. Shouts out to the Jersey Jungle. Before we move on, RJ, you have 3 iconic Colts there behind you. You're clearly a Colts fan. What is a jersey of the Colts that you would like to have that you don't yet?
So first of all, I'm super glad that I got these hung up like literally last week. This Manning jersey I've had for a little over 10 years.
Oh,
Luck jersey, I got his rookie year signed by him to me. And I bought the T.Y. Hilton jersey last year because I was bored in COVID lockdown. And I finally framed them literally 2 to 3 weeks ago and hung them up. So super pumped to be on here, not knowing that it was live stream. Sky did not tell me that I was going to be on camera today. But I told myself that this year I might get myself a little Jonathan Taylor jersey back there. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go JT also. If I'm going to stay Pac-12 bias, which I usually do, I love me some Michael Pittman. I really, really hope Michael Pittman turns out as well. So JT or Michael Pittman would be my guys.
Michael Pittman fits the theme, right? 11, 12, 13, 18. Like he fits the teens. So if he balls out, I need him to ball out, and then he can make the wall.
There's 4 other OG fantasy beasts on the Colts. Reggie Wayne, of course, Marvin Harrison. I want to give a shout out to Dallas Clark.
If you didn't mention Dallas Clark, we would have been in trouble.
And Edgerrin James, and I would mention Marshall Faulk, but everybody thinks of him as a Ram. So I'm going to go with Edgerrin James there as well. Hall of Famer Edgerrin James there. Okay, man, let's have some fun here. So I want to dive into the top 20 dynasty picks right now. And you had mentioned you always talk in the format of Superflex.
Yep.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't. Again, we're primarily a redraft podcast unless we do dynasty sections like this episode. So I don't. I talk single quarterback, no tight end premium, redraft, full PPR for the most part. But you're talking Superflex. And then usually there's dynasty, or there's a tight end premiums a lot in dynasty leagues as well. So let's go through the top 20, man. Again, these are the names and the players that everybody knows for the most part. We're familiar with these guys. We can kind of blast through these. We don't need to break down every single player and stuff, but kind of mention them, just mention the name, the team, and kind of remember us, and then just give us maybe a sentence or 2 on each player, and we can go a little bit deeper on some of these guys. And after we get through maybe the first or second round, I want to dive into maybe 4, 5, 6 players in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds of dynasty leagues, because the reality is, we were talking pre-show, you only have so many 1st and 2nd round picks. And I know that you can manipulate things and get more in those rounds, but if the people in your league know what they're doing, they're going to see you with 4 first round picks. They're no longer going to trade with you. Yeah. So you need to find that value. You need to find the gems that you can wait on. Maybe a quarterback like Davis Mills or Kellen Mond that you're like, man, I trust this guy, but maybe in 2 or 3 years, but you still want to get him on your team while you can, because you always say the cheapest time you're going to get any player is in the rookie draft of a dynasty league before they acquire the actual value. So let's dive in. I'll just read off a handful of names. Maybe we'll do like clumps of 4 or 5, and you can just rattle through them really quickly here, and we'll get into them. So let's go here with, again, we're talking super flex. You're going to hear a lot of quarterbacks, listeners who are not used to that on this podcast. A lot of quarterbacks. Okay, we'll start up at the top. No surprise at the 101, Trevor Lawrence of the Jaguars. 102, my man, Trey Lance. 104, this is, let's see, Justin Fields. And then we have Kyle Pitts and Najee Harris at 5. So let us know one more time where we're getting this information from, and then kind of break down that top 5 that I mentioned. Lawrence, Lance, Fields, Pitts, and Harris.
Yeah, and what you're seeing is a median overall, which is why there's no 102 and there was two 104s there. Essentially, there's some discrepancy between Pitts and Fields being at 104 versus like 103 and 102. So each of them has a share of 102, aka why that's a median, and then Lawrence is like the consensus 101. But I get a lot of my statistics from the analytics of Dynasty, which is at McNamara Dynasty on Twitter. So that's where this information is coming from. He's bringing in real, actual rookie drafts that are coming off of DLF, I believe. So Dynasty League Football. And so this is the actual rookie. I keep wanting to say startup. The actual rookie drafts post NFL draft is what I filtered for. And again, so a lot of players here that the casual redraft players would not see because they're not running like a quarterback premium or a super flex type of league. So Trevor Lawrence, we already kind of talked about him and his safety as the 101. But the discrepancy really lies between Trey Lance, Kyle Pitts, and Justin Fields, and a little bit of Najee Harris, I'm sure, is sprinkled in there. So what you have is you have two quarterbacks in Trey Lance and Justin Fields that can produce fantasy points on the ground. And a lot of times people are, they want to address a draft pick the way that the NFL addresses that draft pick. So we know that Justin Fields was drafted at, I believe it was 11 overall. And so outside that top 10, so they want to look at him as the fourth quarterback off the board. So I would take him as the fourth quarterback. But the truth is when you run, you create fantasy points. We play the game for fantasy points. We do not play it for Super Bowls. And that's why Justin Fields and Trey Lance are up there in jockeying for the second quarterback off the board, if you will. Trey Lance is super raw prospect. The fewest starts in NCAA history for a first round quarterback. That's an important stat. That is the 49ers guy. They went up and they got him as their guy. And, it sounds like they're going to take it slow. I feel like the 49ers are being pretty honest about what they think of Jimmy G and what they're going to do with Jimmy G. They like Jimmy G and what he does for that team, but he doesn't stay healthy. So will we see Trey Lance this year? I don't know. If Jimmy G is healthy and winning, I don't think so. If Jimmy G is healthy and they're not winning, then maybe. It's going to be an interesting situation. And then Kyle Pitts, just an athletic freak. In a non-tight end premium league, I would have a hard time taking Kyle Pitts over Najee Harris. But in a tight end premium league, I have no problem doing that. But the safest bet of all of these players in terms of percentages is the first round running back. They tend to hit at a significantly higher rate than any of the positions that you just listed in quarterback and tight end, especially in the first round. And we already, if you haven't seen all the freaking hype pieces that Najee Harris is putting out of Pittsburgh, then you're already missing out. It sounds like Pittsburgh wants to use him and use him often.
And I'm a little surprised here. I mean, Jamar Chase is our next name on the list, but I'm surprised not to see him in the top 5. Is that strictly because we're talking about Superflex here? So now we have 3 quarterbacks, because when I look at single quarterback dynasty, Jamar Chase is basically a top 3 pick.
Yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned at the top of this segment, but tight end premium is sprinkled into the RDP here, real draft position of actual rookie drafts. That's probably depressing Jamar Chase along with the quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean, Jamar Chase is when it gets to Jamar Chase, the 5 guys that we just listed along with Jamar Chase, those guys are a top echelon of either talent or opportunity. So Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, just exquisite prospects at their respective positions. Najee Harris, he had a great college career, but he's old, came out late. He wouldn't have been better than anybody that came out last year in terms of the running backs outside of Edwards-Helaire. But he's a first round running back, so he's going to he's going to have 4 or 5 years of just opportunity. And then, with the other two quarterbacks, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, you've got the rushing prowess. So you want to take the shots. They got a 5-year deal. They're going to get ample opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great call. Okay, let's move on here. We talked about Ja'Marr Chase a little bit, but he's in our next group, so you can re-mention him if you'd like to, or we'll move on. Zach Wilson, 107, Travis Etienne, 108, Javonta Williams of the Broncos, 109, Mac Jones, 110, and then Devonta Smith of the Eagles at 111.
Yeah, so Ja'Marr Chase, just one last thing with him. In terms of him versus the rest of the wide receivers, he's a big step above. I know that Jalen Waddle was drafted only one pick after him, and again, for the casual player, it's hard to really draw the comparison or look at the difference, especially since Ja'Marr Chase sat out the full season. But he, to summarize it as loosely and easily as possible, he broke out at a younger age. He did amazing things in that Joe Burrow year. And that's what you want to see in a collegiate player versus some of, what Devonta Smith did and Jalen Waddle. So that's why I have Ja'Marr Chase up there, and that's why he's consensus up there. So Zach Wilson and Mac Jones are the two quarterbacks mentioned in this tier. Again, first-round quarterbacks, or quarterbacks drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. Typically, you want to draft them in the first round of your rookie drafts if you can. Justin Herbert, a lot of people really hated on Justin Herbert last year, and he fell to the middle of the second rounds in super flex rookie drafts. And obviously, we see how that turned out. So I think people are overreacting a little bit this year, and they're making sure that all these quarterbacks are up there, or I should say, properly reacting,
overcorrecting.
They're overcorrecting for their mistake last year. Look, no matter what you believe in Mac Jones or Zach Wilson, if you're a Zach Wilson hater, they have the pedigree, and that 5th-year option is uber important. And we play Dynasty in terms of seasons, not a season. And so that's an important designation. And then you touched on 2 running backs. Travis Etienne, we talked about him a little bit earlier. That pass catching is super important to me. He is, again, a first-round running back. They have staying power. They tend to hit often in terms of a top 24 season or better. Javonta Williams, great prospect. He did share with Michael Carter at UNC, so that is odd to me, but he really looks electric on film, has a good profile. I'm drafting him, and I'm not going to be too concerned about that, and I would take him in the position that he's being taken there. And then the last player you mentioned is Devonta Smith. So if you haven't heard, Devonta Smith is extremely small. He's extremely underweight. He looks frail.
He's thin, not small. I think small is like
thin. Yeah, he's
short
like 6
and
foot. That's
skinny.
right.
Like he's not. He's taller. I get it, but just to be clear on that, like a guy like Darren Sproles was small. But Darren Smalls. But Devonta Smith is at least got the height. He's thin.
Yeah. Marvin Harrison is what you hope that he can become. And look, the guy won the Heisman. He's an amazing athlete. Like, I don't want to take away from that. But that's what you hope he becomes. And no one of that stature has ever achieved that. Specifically that stature. He's a little bit built differently from Marvin Harrison, but that's the closest best comp that you can get. So he is definitely our first risky first round pick.
Yep. And the other one, we'll just carry on here. The other one would be Jalen Waddle right behind him, former teammate at Alabama at the 111 spot as well here. Trey Sermon of my Niners, 202. Rashad Bateman on the Ravens, 202 as well. Elijah Moore on the Jets, 204. And we'll stop at Rondale Moore of the Cardinals at 204 as well. So once again, Waddle, Sermon, Bateman, and both Moores, Elijah and Rondale.
It's funny, like I actually got this to load, and the images I sent you this afternoon are already outdated, but it's the same 4, but Bateman has overtaken Sermon. So
It'll fluctuate, of course. We're talking in
Exactly.
May. I mean, this shit's going to be crazy by August, but we got.
Oh man, wait till we start getting data on these guys at camp and whatnot. You got a lot of circulating images and stuff too, and narratives are starting to come out of camp. But Jalen Waddle, man, excellent player. Just couldn't put it together at the right times. He played behind Ruggs and Judy last year, along with Devonta Smith, and Devonta Smith was he is just truly phenomenal in what he has accomplished in his collegiate career. Jalen Waddle gets hurt this year. I think that actually stifles his ability to produce, and it also helps lead to a Devonta Smith Heisman. Overall, he's a talented player, but he's a risky profile. So you have to, as a dynasty player, split hairs there. Which way do you want to go? Do you want to look at the data that says he's a risky profile because he's never broken out? And what that means is he's never achieved higher than 20% or 30% of the overall production of his offense? Or do you want to look and say, hey man, he's a 6th overall pick. And he was talented when he was on the field, and now he's back with his college quarterback and bet on that. And again, there's risk there in that pick, but there's risk in all of these picks. Yep. Moving down, I'm going to talk about the other 3 wide receivers. It seems that there is a bit of a tier break once you get past Waddle, and you're looking at Bateman and the 2 Moores. Bateman has an excellent profile. He was my wide receiver 2 going into the NFL draft, and he remains my wide receiver 2 coming out of the NFL draft. Look, we all know Lamar Jackson has accuracy issues. Does he have this amazing correction like Josh Allen did and really ascend in that department? I don't know. Is Rashad Bateman the guy that helps that ascension? Potentially. He's no Steph Diggs, Yeah. But I like the situation. I think he can dominate and be the wide receiver 1 in that scenario. So hopefully he ascends. And then the 2 Moores, I like Elijah Moore better than Rondale Moore in terms of their situation. Elijah Moore has the opportunity to emerge and be the leading wide receiver, whereas Rondale Moore, I mean, he's undersized with massive explosion, but he's going to be playing second fiddle to Kyler Murray in the run game and DeAndre Hopkins in the receiving game. So I would split it with Elijah Moore over Rondale Moore, and then wrapping that up with Trey Sermon. There's a lot of controversy around Trey Sermon and the guy that we're going to talk about in the next group of guys, Michael Carter. People like Michael Carter because they feel like his situation is better. People like Trey Sermon because of the draft capital, and they feel like his situation is better. I will say that I gave a huge breakdown on our last pod on the Commish Dynasty, talking about why Trey Sermon in just the raw numbers is a safer bet than Michael Carter in just the raw statistics or the raw numbers. So if you're more interested in a deep dive on that, you can check that out. But look, Shanahan backs over the last several years have been a war of attrition, a lot of injury. If Trey Sermon can emerge, if draft capital does mean something to the Shanahans, then he's going to get 60+% of the opportunity, and he's going to do well with that. He's a big bruising back with a good offense and a good defense. So I'm in on taking shots at that. That's kind of my short on Trey Sermon. I constantly tweet about him because everybody hates him.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, we did have Chris chime in here on Twitter and Periscope. How do you guys feel about Trey Sermon? So I'll bring that up right now. Look, I'm biased as a Niner fan, but I always like to put that aside when I'm actually talking fantasy. The reality is right now he steps into a backfield with 6.5 running backs. And until 2 or 3 of these guys get cut, probably Wayne Gallman and JaMychal Hasty, maybe even, it could even be Rahim Moser, believe it or not.
I've seen that circulating.
Yeah, just the age and everything else. I mean, I still think he's the starter. I just drafted him in like the 9th round of a dynasty league, which you probably frown upon, but I needed another running back, and I was like, well, shit, if I get 1 year out of him, I'm pumped if he's healthy. So Trey Sermon, I think, is an athlete. I think will be fine. And if he landed anywhere other than San Francisco, I wouldn't be as bullish. But because he lands in San Francisco, they have turned running backs nobody's ever heard of until week 5 when they blow up for the Niners. They've turned those guys into RB2s minimum in fantasy football. They've had 3 different running backs over the last 2 seasons score 3 touchdowns in a game. All right, Rahim Moser, who was nobody for 5 years in the NFL, ran for 200 yards, and he is very good. But it's the scheme itself. It's a Shanahan scheme dating back to his pops in Denver with Terrell Davis. Now you get a high pedigree guy coming out of state. The legendary names that come out of Ohio State running backs. And now you have this kid coming out here who, may not be the starter day one. If Rahim Mostert leaves, though, I think Sermon might be, if it's not Jeff Wilson. And I think even if it is Jeff Wilson, Sermon would take him over. And if he can stay healthy, I think it'd be just fine. So I want to kind of pump the brakes on my analysis because a lot of my analysis is face value. That's why you're here for the dynasty deep dives. But I am excited to see him in the system because of where he landed. But if you switch him, you put Michael Carter with the 49ers and you put Trey Sermon on the Jets, I'm definitely not as excited for Trey Sermon because as an individual, I'm not overly thrilled. I think the landing spot was tremendous for him, and he will succeed in the landing spot with his capabilities.
So I think that's key. Two things emerge out of that. One, you're a fan, and sometimes fans can have rose-colored glasses, right? They can see things with the you're so pumped that you got Trey Sermon. He's going to be the best. But other times fans watch so closely that they truly do know a lot more about that team. And so you can kind of weed through that as the listener as to which side you think that is. But the other thing is if they were switched, and I think that's a good point. So a lot of people liked Michael Carter coming into the NFL draft. A lot of them had him ranked as their 4th running back. I had it close between Michael Carter and Trey Sermon. A lot of that was on the heels of Trey Sermon's end of season run, and I felt like he was just a coach's type of back. Look, that's just a feeling. That's nothing. I actually projected him to the Jags in the 3rd round, and that was one of the only picks that really worried me about James Robinson. If they were switched and Trey Sermon went in the 4th round to New York and Michael Carter went in the 3rd round to San Francisco, I would be in the same boat in terms that I would be drafting Michael Carter ahead of Trey Sermon because the pedigree is there, and I liked Michael Carter's profile. He's a little bit short, but he's a bowling ball. He can catch the ball and things like that. So, pedigree says a lot about a situation. And of course, situation says a lot too. But I wanted to touch on that because I thought that was a good point.
I totally agree. And Chris, when you listen back, man, I appreciate you chiming in. We have another question here, but I'll get to that at the end. Let's move on here with our final tier, and then we'll dive into just a couple deeper names in the rookie category. Michael Carter comes up on the list. We've talked about him at length at this point, but let's talk about Michael Carter of the Jets, 205. Teres Marshall, one of my favorite wide receivers in general in this class. Another LSU machine at 205. Kadarius Toney, very polarizing character in fantasy football in general at 208. And then Pat Freiermuth, the second tight end on this list here to the Steelers at 208. So Michael Carter, Teres Marshall, Kadarius Toney, and Pat Freiermuth.
So again, back to the tight ends, it's tight end premium. So that's why you see Patty Fry up there. Good overall profile. I like Patty Fry. Not much to say that he's my second tight end in this class. And that's largely on pedigree. If Brevin Jordan was drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, I'd probably take a little bit more of a gamble on Jordan just because of his college production. But that's why Pat's here. Now, looking at the 2 wide receivers and the running back, honestly, I hate Kadarius Toney. I hate his profile. He didn't break out until he was 21. He's a 4th year, 4th year collegiate wide receiver. Typically, you want to see your wide receivers come out at 20 in their 3rd year. There's a lot with wide receivers for them to really have staying power. I would take Kadarius Toney over Michael Carter. I will do my best not to just draft on situation. 4th round running backs hit at less than 10% of the time for a single top 24 season. Now, I know that's super nerdy, and I know a lot of you are like, yeah, but the Jets and there's nobody there and this and this. I would bet money that Tevin Coleman is the first back to take a snap on week 1 of the season. So, that's just part of it. I hate Kadarius Toney, but he's a 1st-round wide receiver. He has better odds to hit than Michael Carter. I would take him over Michael Carter. So that is probably a hot take in terms of ADP and Twitter and all of that. That said, Teres Marshall is my favorite out of all of these guys. And honestly, I like Teres Marshall probably better than Elijah Moore and Rondale Moore. I really like the landing spot. I really like the talent. He was able to break out in college. I mean, there's a lot of positive to say, and Teres Marshall is coming at a discount simply because he's in what seems to be a crowded situation in Carolina. But I disagree that that's crowded, and he could emerge in year 1 and without a doubt have an opportunity to emerge in year 2.
Man, I'm Sammy D wheels up, man. I'm really stoked on the Panthers this year. We'll see what happens. And I agree. I got Teres Marshall in a startup here recently as well, and I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, man, let's dive into maybe just again 2 or 3 names. You can pick 1 per position if you'd like, or 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. We've talked about all the quarterbacks, I guess, and there's not really another tight end to talk about. So let's focus on the running backs and the wide receivers. Why don't you give me 2 running backs, and then maybe I'll just give you an extra name that you don't mention that I might be into, and then you can give me 2 wide receivers, and I'll do the same thing in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds if we're going to go that far. And you can call these sleepers if you want. I'm more just thinking of like extra names to think of. And again, we're starting to get into the realm of these aren't necessarily day 1 starters. Don't expect to draft these guys and have them make an immediate impact. However, especially wide receivers, these guys could be people that, Justin Jefferson was not Justin Jefferson until week 3 or 4, right? Yep. So you could potentially, Brandon Ayuk was not Brandon Ayuk until like week 7 or something stupid. So you can wait on some of these wide receivers, especially. So give me maybe 2 running backs here in the 2nd, 3rd to 5th round that you're extra excited about.
So people are taking a few running backs ahead of these guys. I would much rather trade back and collect these guys. I have 3 that I want to talk about. So Romander Stevenson is one out of Oklahoma. He split the backfield with Trey Sermon, kept Trey Sermon off the field to where Trey Sermon transferred to Ohio State. He goes into a system that notably uses the best running back. New England, look, they use multiple running backs, yes, but if a running back is producing and doing well, they will run with that running back over others. So I like his opportunity in a backfield that can't seem to stay healthy either. And Damien Harris hasn't like wowed anybody. Elijah Mitchell is the next one on this list. Same reasons as Trey Sermon. Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon are the safest 2 running backs in that backfield. 2 people are going home, just like you said, and one of them is probably going to shock us. And so Elijah Mitchell, prototypical size, what you like to see in a running back, decent profile, looked to be a flyer. He might end up being a special teams guy. He might go the way of Jeff Wilson and end up on the practice squad. I'm not 100% certain, but I like taking shots at the San Francisco backfield because when they get called up, they play. The other guy was Jamar Jefferson. So I actually liked him before the Kerryon Johnson cut. And I like him a little bit more now. He's more of a 1 injury away stash. I love DeAndre Swift. I've been acquiring a ton of DeAndre Swift. So I don't think he's going to eat into DeAndre Swift's workload, but Jamal Williams is probably going to be playing in situational roles, and Jamar Jefferson could have a shot. He's talented enough to come in and get some carries if something were to happen in the backfield.
Okay, I'll throw another name out there. I know he's kind of he's maybe like the Kadarius Toney of running backs, at least of the guys getting drafted notably. thoughts on Kenny Gainwell? And it's mostly because he's a PPR guy. I mean, we're all hoping. I mean, James White set the standard, right? Well, really, it was like Theo Riddick back in the day, who was like the hybrid wide receiver running back. James White, Gio Bernard, some of these guys. Although it's very crowded, obviously, in Philadelphia. And now they have Miles Sanders still. They bring back Jordan Howard for some reason. Now they bring in Kerryon Johnson, and they have Kenny Gainwell, and they have Boston Scott. It's a mess, but he had a great couple seasons at Memphis, and they have produced some quality NFL running backs, namely Antonio Gibson. So how do you feel about Kenny Gainwell, and is he somebody that you could see emerging, maybe not passing Miles Sanders, but could he be the 1-2, or at least take Miles Sanders off on third downs?
So Gainwell's another guy that I really, really liked preseason or pre-draft, but he didn't get the pedigree. And that was a little bit disappointing because I liked all the things you just said about him. I did like his opportunity when he landed in Philadelphia. I didn't love it by any means. He's being drafted in the second round, so at cost, I'm not in. But in terms of just the player, and especially if you're looking in redraft, I think he's a little bit more talented for a situational piece. He's obviously more talented than Jordan Howard. The Kerryon Johnson signing hurts because they didn't plan on Kerryon Johnson being available when they drafted Kenny Gainwell, but obviously they liked him enough to claim him. So I think that stifles his ability to get on the field this year, but he's definitely a good stash.
Cool. All right, let's move on to wide receivers then. Why don't you give me 2 or 3 wide receivers that you're stoked on here?
So there's a few wide receivers here. Nobody that I absolutely love, but kind of looking back at, again, falling pedigree is where I tend to kind of look. So to kind of spell that out a little bit, there's some like Amon-Ra St. Brown is going ahead of a lot of guys that were drafted in the second and third round. I wouldn't make that bet just because the situation looks right. But I like these two guys that are going back to back. I like their opportunity, and they got day 3 round 3 capital, and that's Diamy Brown and Amari Rogers. They are largely situational, but with capital essentially. Diamy Brown, he's another small slot type guy. Nothing absolutely world beating by any means, but he's going to be in an offense that I think is going to move the ball pretty well. And he'll have opportunities out of the slot, and he's got a good wide receiver there to kind of lead him. And that seems to be something that he would need in order to emerge. Amari Rogers, if he's playing with Aaron Rodgers, look, this is the narrative around Amari Rogers. That's why he's being elevated in rookie drafts. There's issues there. I mean, we haven't really, just like Tom Brady didn't love rookie wide receivers, we haven't really seen the Green Bay offense be friendly to rookie wide receivers, but he profiles as a slot receiver. We've seen that offense be friendly to the slot. And so, in the third round, you could take worse shots, and I would be happy to take a shot on him.
I have been touting Diamy Brown for a long time before the draft happened, and people were putting on Twitter who was your favorite, sleeper, if you will, but just a name in Dynasty people aren't talking about at the top that could be one of the better guys in the draft class, in a year or two. I kept putting Diamy Brown. I loved what he was able to do in North Carolina. He's definitely not polished. But look, DK Metcalf, had a bad combine outside of his 40-yard dash, and he was a one route wide receiver, a limited route tree, raw receiver, all this other shit. Well, he's DK Metcalf, right? I mean, the dude's absolutely phenomenal. I'm not saying Diamy Brown's going to be DK Metcalf by any means. However, as long as Fitzpatrick is throwing bombs, that's not necessarily Terry McLaurin's game. It's certainly not Curtis Samuel's game. The Sims twins out there might have a chance, but I do think Diamy Brown's going to have a chance. So he was a name that I was excited about. I'll throw 2 more names at you here for the wide receiver, and then we'll wrap this up. How do you feel about Josh Palmer for the Chargers? I've heard nobody talk about Josh Palmer for the Chargers. I have my own take, but I like to hear yours first. And then, maybe some of these speedsters, like there's a lot. I mean, this whole draft class is like 5'9", 175 or whatever. But how do you feel about some of these other guys? I mean, Tylan Wallace, again, kind of buried, unfortunately, over there, but Anthony Schwartz, I don't know, even, Tutu Atwell or, some of these other guys, these deeper names, maybe in Dez Fitzpatrick, who we kind of brought up, Daz Newsome for the Bears. There's a lot of these like deeper wide receiver names. Is there anyone else that sticks out to you and just your thoughts on Josh Palmer? Because I think he's kind of just slid completely completely under the radar. And I think he's going to be well. And I'm just very bullish on Herbert, obviously.
Yeah, in my head, I was like, please don't say Tutu Atwell. Please don't say Tutu Atwell.
Hey, you don't have to talk about Tutu Atwell. Everyone else does. He was on the list and I said it, but let's
if you want my Tutu Atwell take, I did it. I posted a retweet today with Tutu.
All right, I'll read it over there. We'll save time on the podcast.
In terms of Josh Palmer, we actually talked about him last week as well. That is the biggest wide receiving core in the NFL. And so I like that. I mean, he fits into a very, very big wide receiving core. He's intriguing. I believe he was drafted in the 3rd round, so I like the draft capital there. Mm-hmm. The other guys that you kind of touched on, nobody really jumps out. I mean, Tylan Wallace would have been a guy that, again, he falls to the 4th round. It's not really what you want to see, but he was the 2nd wide receiver drafted that team. They drafted another wide receiver last year in the 4th round, in Devin Duvernay. They drafted
James Crochet as well.
Yeah, and then they have 2 first-round wide receivers ahead of him in the last 3 years. So I really, really just hate his. He's going to be what's his name? Is it Tyler Johnson down in Tampa Bay? Tampa, he's gonna be Tyler Johnson, where people really, really liked him,
dude,
and then he didn't get the pedigree, Johnson. And he's buried. Like guys that get buried, they just don't get the opportunity to emerge, and that it's unfortunate, honestly. But that's kind of it. You mentioned Austin Schwartz. I believe he went to Cleveland in the 3rd round.
Anthony Schwartz.
Yeah. Cleveland in the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. Super like fast burner type guy. That wide receiver core is probably going to have quite a shakeup at in 2022.
Yeah.
He's a stash for me. Pedigree, falling in rookie drafts. It's not sexy. People don't want sexy guys, or people want the sexy player, the sexy position even. And Anthony Schwartz doesn't check either of those boxes. I would be stashing him in the 4th or 5th round of your rookie draft.
I think that's a great call. He's a burner, man. 4.2 speed. When Odell's healthy, he can be fast, but we can't count on Odell. He might be out of here at the trade deadline or the end of the season anyway. Landry, of course, we know what he does. Donovan Peoples-Jones showed up a little bit last year, but he's not that burner. Higgins as well. So there's some of those other marches. Okay, we got through it here. We got another question here from our man Josh. Shouts out to Josh. He did drop in here. This is interesting. I want to talk to you about this quick, and then we're going to get out of here. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're on the podcast, this question was, do your quarterback rankings change amongst themselves in single quarterback or 2 quarterback leagues or super flex, of course, i.e. drafting for upside or safety of a quarterback, Lawrence or Lance? So basically, if you're playing single quarterback or you're playing super flex quarterback, do your rankings of quarterbacks change depending on your league settings, or do you just rank your quarterbacks however, and if it's 4-point touchdown, 6-point touchdown, single, super flex, whatever it is, do you just roll with it?
Honestly, it's a good question. And, much like Chris, I rarely check the scoring settings of the leagues I'm in. No, I'm just kidding. I feel like Josh is taking a shot at me because he knows that I am terrible at updating my rankings and I really run off of tiers. But I do like the question because it's very creative in terms of an approach. So on one hand, no, my rankings would not change, but my strategy would. And I think we really learned this with the emergence of Lamar Jackson. So I would rather take a safe quarterback in 1 quarterback leagues and then take a shot at someone that can run, like Lamar Jackson, and the cheapest version of that if I can. So if that's Justin Fields this year, because people think that he won't start right away or whatever. If it's Trey Lance, same situation. That would be my goal. I wouldn't necessarily go off of rankings. If I have Big Ben above any of them in terms of fantasy output for the season, but I've already got quarterback locked up, I'm going to take the upside in a 1 quarterback league. So I won't change my rankings, but I'll change my strategy, if you will.
I think that's a great call. And I think I completely agree with you. My rankings are not going to change. I also draft in tiers, and we can kind of discuss what that means later on this summer here. But I agree with you. And again, I'm getting more into super flex and 2 quarterback leagues, which does change things. So instead of moving a guy up because I'm in a super flex league, I might just say, is this guy, I mean, I think the one thing you can think of is if you have, I don't know, I'll use Aaron Rodgers as a bad example today, but let's use Justin Herbert. You could put him as like a back end QB1 in single quarterback leagues. If you somehow got Justin Herbert as your second quarterback in super flex leagues, you're killing it. I mean, that's unbelievable, right? So that I think is when I would start to manipulate my mind frame. But also in Superflex, you obviously get a lot more value out of those Kirk Cousins, Derek Carrs, Tom Brady's, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Carson Wentz quarterbacks as well that now have a ton of value, and they're getting drafted in the 5th or 6th round because it's Superflex. So everybody else, all this other skill players, then fall down the line. So
yep.
Yo, RJ, it's been a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you jumping on. Thanks so much. We're going to definitely do this again. I really appreciate you coming on and giving some dynasty discussion. I would love to get you on another time when we have Lucas and Dwayne on. They are, again, kind of our dynasty brains on the TCK pod, but I wanted to pick your brain as well. You and I have been talking behind the scenes. You've helped me out with a couple dynasty questions already this season, and I'm going to have more for you, I'm sure. So I really appreciate your time, man. Before we get out of here, once again, can you please remind all the TCK podders where we can find all your information?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at DynastyFF_RJ, and then we do have a show handle that's at Dynasty_Addicts, and Brian, my co-host, runs the show handle. So Brian's really good at retweeting any sort of polls that you want to get mass voting on for trades, questions, things like that. So definitely tweet Brian there, but we're always open to receive questions, ideas for shows, things like that.
I love what you guys do, man. Shouts out to Brian. Shouts out to Josh. Josh has been on the program plenty. We'll have to get Brian on eventually as well, talk about his Dolphins. And it's always a pleasure, man. And we're going to have to get you another jersey back there behind you and see if we can fill up your wall a little bit more, man. But it's been an absolute pleasure. RJ of the Commish Dynasty side of things, shouts out always to the Commish crew. Of course, you can find me on Twitter as well at my name, Sky Guasco on Twitter. On Instagram, you can find us at fantasyfootball_TCK pod. We're on TikTok at TCK pod as well, Facebook group, the Candlestick Kids. And of course, if you're watching here on YouTube, please give us a subscribe, smash the thumbs up, and give us a comment on your favorite couple of dynasty players as well. If you have any other questions, you can DM me or hit me up, and I will send those on to RJ as well, and he can help you out with the dynasty leagues. Big up to Bomb Banana Hot Sauce and Jersey Jungle as well, our sponsors for today's show. We'll be back with you next week. We are crossing into the 390s. Again, just 10 episodes away from 400. Very excited about that. For RJ and the rest of the Commish Dynasty crew and the Commish Fantasy Football brand as well, big family over there, I'm your host, Sky Guasco. We'll catch you next time. We are out of here.